sticking with the theme of policing, we should talk about non-crime hate incidents. Finally, a major political party has said that they've got to go. The Conservatives have said it would be their policy if they're re-elected to end this policing tool. Just to explain a little bit. So, I mean, by nature of them being non-crime, they're not actually part of the law. Essentially, the way it works is that you can have one logged against you if you do something or say something that any person, perhaps either a victim or any other third party, considers to be motivated by hate. Which, Tom, this leads to the absurdity where just about anything can be interpreted as a non-crime hate incident and can be logged by the police as a result.
No, absolutely. I mean, the Free Speech Union reckon there's in excess of about 250,000 of these things that have been recorded in recent years. And there's some of the high-profile cases that people will remember. Harry Miller having one recorded against his name by Humberside Police because, amongst other things, he reposted a trans-skeptical limerick on social media, famously visited by the police, called up by the police, saying that they needed to check his thinking. That was kind of the moment in which this issue really exploded into public consciousness, and his court case was one of the key ones in terms of paring back this process and ultimately leading it to becoming a big political issue. But the number of cases which have been exposed since then are even more absurd. I mean, there was the gentleman who had one recorded against him because he kept whistling the theme tune of Bob the Builder to his neighbour. There was the number of school children who have had them recorded against them, which was never supposed to be part of the plan, but the police have just been doing it anyway. Yeah. For, calling each other names, effectively saying someone smells like fish, or calling someone a retard on the playground, or something like something that should really never have been a police issue was still there.
Plus, you can say retard now as well.
No, exactly. So they obviously haven't got the vibe shift within the constabulary across the place. But there was one of a gentleman who had one logged against his barber because he gave him an aggressive haircut. This is so absurd. It so obviously needed to be dealt with. It's nice to see one of the main parties saying categorically that it's time for these things to go. It would have been even nicer if the Tories had done this when they were still in power, although there were efforts to pare the process back, because it's just one of the more sinister forms of speech policing that exists, precisely because it's non-crime. You're really getting into the realm of pre-crime, kind of Philip K. Dick territory, when you're essentially kind of quasi-criminalising speech, even though no law has been passed suggesting that you can. Yeah. And it's always worth remembering in this isn't just something that's on a police database quietly somewhere. It can sharpen an advanced DBS check. It could stop you getting certain types of jobs, could potentially ruin your job prospects. So great to see it, a little bit late in the day, but still a positive development, I would say.
And also the police don't have to inform you that they've recorded it against you. So you could have this black mark against your name for essentially thought crime, and you might not even know about it. And
I think I have one.
Or maybe we can find out. If you know the police force, we can probably find out. But
I don't know.
It's likely.
And that is a trend that we're seeing now, is that because the police seem desperate to sort of atone for past wrongs, that they will happily just become the weapon of whatever activist group is willing to try and use them. We've seen that with the trans issue time and time again. We've seen it, more recently with even more absurd small-scale stories of, a school getting upset that a couple of parents are complaining too vigorously, and so they can effectively send the heavies round to try and, terrify them. It's incredible. Again,
it's the absence at the top. I've said it before, but Keir Starmer said he would end the culture wars. Yeah. The person who's ended the culture wars is Trump. Trump has taken serious steps to make sure that individuals on the ground aren't fighting these battles in their daily life, whereas Starmer, who again is just this absence, his kind of lack of conviction on any subject means that the fights have to be, undertook by ordinary people, so we see all the court cases, all the tribunals, because he's just not doing his job. So it'll keep going on until we get, I hate to say this, but someone with, I don't want to say a strong man because that suggests something else. But we have to get someone who actually wants to govern, and make decisions. Because otherwise, we'll all be fighting. I mean, it's one reason why I'm getting out of the UK. Yeah. Because, I'm sick of having these arguments and fights and knowing the law not protecting me, the law not protecting my freedom of speech, my employer's not protecting my freedom of speech. I'm done with it all,
Yeah.
So,
and you think that even if someone like Starmer might not be. We can't expect him to be a free speech absolutist, but you at least think he'd understand, or you'd think someone in the police would understand that this stuff is trivial. It's at least, very least, a waste of police time.
Yeah.
But it does actually, you mentioned two-tier policing earlier. It does reveal the sort of warped priorities of the police. I mean, there was one quite funny, amusing case where a man managed to get a non-crime hate incident recorded against his drug dealer because he thought the drug dealer had ripped him off because he was gay. And you think, what's the hierarchy of criminality in that kind of circumstance?
Yeah.
Tom, do you want to add?
No, it's a reminder that I think there is a tendency to, when you look at all of the speech policing that's been going on, to say that ultimately the police are just enforcing the law. The problem is the politicians. That's ultimately true. Of course it is. The failure to act, as you're saying, Graham, is precisely why this stuff goes on unabated. But the non-crime hate incident is a great example of how a lot of this stuff was generated from within the police themselves. These non-crime hate incidents, they were never collected because there was an act of parliament. Basically goes back to the McPherson report in 1999, this recommendation that you should record racist incidents as a kind of form of intelligence to work to make sure that you kind of get ahead of any potentially violent action that might happen later. It slowly percolates through all the policing quangos, and then they come up with this absurd guidance which basically compels police forces, says that automatically they should be logging these things, that it should go for every protected characteristic, no safeguards whatsoever in place, and you end up in the situation that we're in now. I think because the police, even though it might have a kind of small c conservative sort of reputation, has been as given to being captured by these ideologies as any other, not least I think because they've got it in their head that the way they atone for horrendous past wrongs, like the botched investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder, is to police hurty words on the internet, which is a grotesque conclusion to come to, but it seems to be the one that they have come to. So it's a reminder, I think, that the fight is legal, obviously, it's political. It's also about our institutions, which is why you do need a concerted effort in the way that we've been talking about to push this stuff out. It's kind of like, it's insufficient to just be kind of unwoke and to ignore the cultural war. You've almost got to be like kind of Ibram X. Kendi way, actively anti-woke to actually get this stuff pushed out at this point. Wasn't there some sort of meeting at MI5 where they argued that the far right was the greatest threat to what's the word? Peace in the UK, or public order in the UK. I mean, to look at the recent examples of anti-Semitism that we've had for the last few months or year or two, and to come to that conclusion is absolutely extraordinary. And it just shows that, we unfortunately, the UK unfortunately has some ideological actors in positions where they're going to do as much damage as Kim Philby did, when he betrayed the UK. And I don't think it's being seen as the emergency that it is. It's again, you need someone with conviction to actually step in and fix all this stuff.
I suspect it might have been the Home Office rather than MI5, because even if MI5 has gone woke, and there's no,
is it the head of MI5 or MI6 who's got his pronouns in his bio? I can't remember which one. Might be both, but
at least MI5 will. There's no way for MI5 to get around the fact that their caseload is overwhelmingly to do with Islamist terrorists rather than far-right terrorists. But interestingly, the referrals to prevent are hugely, over. It's often, far-right or even just right-wing. William Shawcross did the review into Prevent, found that people would just basically, people who had the same views as like right-wing columnists or something would be sort of marked as a terrorist threat. But certainly the Home Office thinks that. Well, and we know what Keir Starmer thinks. We've seen the reaction to adolescence, haven't we? That's the great.
It's an attempt to force everyone to think the way your average BBC journalist thinks, or your or Guardian columnist. Everything outside of that extremely narrow belief system is to be suspected, and it makes for. It's a terrible cultural thing as well, because it makes for a sort of bubbling mediocrity. That's always there, and that once you step outside the realms of it, you're immediately shut down, which is hugely dangerous at a time when I saw yesterday a piece that argued that the UK could be on the road to civil war, and like that might be hyperbole, but we need to know that if something does go wrong, if the infrastructure of the UK is affected by mass civil unrest, that we have people who will, be be grown up enough to deal with it, you know. But we don't have anything close to that.